Awesome. So, I know you guys have been getting a lot of gadget stuff, and in the original discussion with Eric and Alan about what I might have to offer, I really kind of pushed back from another demo, which I'm happy to do, but they can take some time to kind of prep and develop, to kind of a loose demonstration, a discussion, and kind of I guess a meta discussion of what in the world we're doing, why we're doing it, and kind of bringing this back to the people for whom we do it for, and a discussion of our students, and really what's the point of all this. And I love getting a chance to chat with folks who are passionate about the same things that I am, and we want to deliver the most efficient, engaging, exciting curriculum to our students, and sometimes that's done by making dumb bombs, as my high school biology teacher did, to teach us about chemical reactions and methane production. All the jokes we had about methane production in high school. Oh, I still doesn't get it. Or those are well orchestrated, finely tuned digital tools that we produce and deliver to them at the right time, the right tool, right time. So I kind of want to talk about a couple of those things as we get going here. But also I want to start with the back channel, with the idea in mind that we're not just going to talk today about this, that this is the beginning of our discussion, and that this may continue on. And I want to make sure that we're able to do that, I mean, as close as we can. And this is a small enough group we can do it. But so we'll use Twitter to be able to do that. If you use Twitter, great. My Twitter handle is here, and we can use today the 3D Game Lab hashtag, and if you're interested in doing that, you can fire some questions, and we'll work that way. This also gives you the opportunity to text your friends or email and get away with it. So we won't ask any questions like, oh, you must be formulating a good question. So you can thank me for that. So you don't even have to really pay attention. I presented a couple of weeks ago to an older group of teachers and administrators in the Philadelphia area, and many of them did not know what Twitter was. They thought tweeting was when you peed your pants a little. So if that's what you think, then please don't tweet. That would be that. So I teach at Boise State in the Department of EdTech, and I prepare pre-service teachers to use technology in the classroom. I also teach master's level courses in educational gaming, simulation, and virtual world. Mostly I do all of that so I can play video games at home and tell my wife I'm doing research, which is a great gimmick if you can get it. I also just finished my doctorate, so if any of you need me to mow your lawn, I'm in need of a little money. Here come the student loans. So before all of this, I was a real teacher. Well, sort of. I taught for about 10 years in high school. I taught high school band, of all things. And we had tons of band tricks. No band trick babies. Thankfully, that's my badge of honor. Those of you who are in band know exactly what I'm talking about. And it's a lot of fun to actually get to talk about those things. So I think it's important to remember kind of the whole purpose. I mean, the students that we teach and the landscape of education and the role of those of us in the educational industry will change more in the next 10 years than it has in the last 100. The shift in the educational paradigm has already begun. We're in the throes of it right now, and it will require tremendous 21st century talent and ability for us to get a handle on what they're going to need and prepare them in a way that we've never been asked to prepare them for. And although many don't believe it, the tools and methods that we use for our students are also changing. It's hard for people to wrap their mind around sometimes, but the internet, mobile devices, social networks, and even video games will play as much of a role in the next century as textbooks, blackboards, and desks have in the last. And it'll take incredible people in the education industry to be able to manage that. Because we'll be wrong, frankly. School is what school was, and will be wrong in the eyes of many folks because they see school the way, I mean, think about it, is there anything else that we're all such phenomenal experts in? I mean, what other things have you done between 12 and 16, or in my case, 31 years? Although I did the math, I went back to my transcript and looked at the number of classes that I've taken. 138, just in college. It's a lot. It makes you an expert at something. Usually it makes you an expert at figuring out, is this kind of teacher, or is this kind of teacher? Is this the, I really have to read the reading, or I can ask, that awesome person who reads everything next to me to wrap it, up in a nice little bow. So, really, the future is in our hands, and it's a frightening thought. It really freaks me out. I tweeted it just now. So the big topics today that I mentioned that we want to kind of have this bigger conversation. We're going to bring it back to some very, very specific approaches that happen to be game-based, and the research that we've applied toward those approaches. We're very excited about being at the front end of a trend in education described as quest-based learning, which is a form of game-based learning. And you're familiar with it. We didn't invent it. Video games did. But it's a very compelling way to deliver content and instruction. We're going to kind of dig into that. So I want to talk just a little bit about what's wrong and how we're going to fix it. The game as it relates to school, because there is a game afoot in school right now that we're currently playing. We're talking about changing the rules of that game and how and why we built the system that we're using to do that. So, if you'll indulge me, I want to be negative here, but I think in order to change, for the information age, rather, to shape the new paradigm of education, we need to kind of get our heads around what the problem is. So, let's have just a quick discussion about what's wrong. What's wrong with school as we know? What's wrong with education? Not enough funding. I was going to say, what's wrong with it other than it's an industry that somehow found a place for all of us? And that can't be that good. And if you want to throw those up, that's good too. Not enough funding. There's not enough money to do what we want to do, right? Is that a fair way to kind of continue that discussion? And we get paid enough, but there's not enough money for the others.
I think it's there's still the sort of factory style tailorist model of learning, one size fits all.
Right. Well, this worked for these students, so it must work for all students. The one size fits all model. That's a very industrial kind of philosophy. And we do. We have a system that is, as I think Kim Robinson said, built in the interests of industrialism and in the image of it.
I think the energy has changed back to fun. Not just I have to go to school, I hate the teachers, I hate school, I hate the food.
It's adversarial from the start.
School needs, in terms of marketing, school needs to have a different corporate identity and brand.
I like that line of thinking. That's really cool.
Yeah, I look at my 16-year-old nephew back in Germany. He hates to go to school. But the only thing about going to school is at 4 p.m. He goes play paintball, play soccer, biking, and so it's a block in a day. It's not an activity of the day.
Right. Yeah, and it in many ways stands in the way of real life. Yeah, it's an interesting way to describe it. What else? What's some of the other criticisms of it? So lack of authenticity. Really, I mean, this isn't meaningful to me because this is not where I want to be or what I want to do. So it's not authentic. This is not what I want my life to be.
And then on the other side, we have GE, where they do those comparison where this high school kid reports a robot on a science fair, and the GE engineer tells how many because
yeah.
our high school teachers right now have the same impact on now in the education industrial complex.
It's interesting because I think it's easy to highlight individual success stories in schools. We can do it. I mean, we're all our own brand of individual success story in school. We've gotten to where we are by following a path that largely is built around education. So it's hard in one respect to criticize the path that we take because obviously, hey, look, here we are. We get the lemon bars and other people don't. But the other side of that is, well, there were a ton of students that went through the same conditions that we did, but for them it didn't lead to this place, or it didn't lead maybe even in the same direction. And why is that? I see a lot of that, and we're obviously very familiar with Saul Kahn's work. Very energetic, excitable guy. He's found a lot of people who really want to pursue his approach. We look at it more specifically and really break down the guts of what he's doing. And yes, it's video delivery, but it's didactic lecture. What we've identified through 30 years of educational research as one of the least effective ways of transferring knowledge. It's a novel approach. And like PowerPoint, its novelty will probably wear off. Now, they've got some other things going. Certainly, I don't want to slam the Khan Academy. Anything at this point that will get a student to move in a positive direction is a good thing. Their game-based elements, their badging, achievements, and those types of things in the system are all really exciting and rewarding game-based pieces. But I think it's part of a larger discussion we want to have about are we creating experiences or are we creating very specific kind of rigid pathways by which we expect every student to be as successful as the last. What else? So we've identified funding. We've identified branding. I like the way you described it. What else?
Teacher training is kind of different states also one size fits all. This idea that everyone needs to go to the classroom with the same set of skills. You only have certain skills like teaching special ed or in special education. Maybe everyone needs to adhere to the same standards.
Here's the pedagogy you have to do.
Right, but the standards, everyone needs to adhere to the same standards. Those standards may be controlled by people with particular qualifications.
My favorite of the ironic teacher training scenarios is the very didactic, teacher training on diversifying learning experiences in the classroom.
I once
Here are the bullet points.
I once saw something here was on interactive learning using the writer projector.
Yep. I'm not going to say that this piece is a perfect experiential opportunity. Certainly, I have some ideas and some arguments that I may want to deliver in this, but I'd like this to be a discussion as much as is possible. As we discussed at the very beginning, one of the original ideas was to do a big interactive game, but unfortunately, those require a lot of time. And typically, the more interactive, the fewer points you can cover in a short amount of time. And if we accept that this is just the beginning of the dialogue that we may have, or that you may have with others, it's worth kind of jumping in down on. Anything else that you can think of? And I know there's more out there, but criticisms that you hear about school, what's wrong with it, why it's not working. That the high school credential, the one big badge.
Or the college.
Yeah, or even the college, yeah. The one big badge that says they fit here. They're educated. Then they get there and maybe they don't have strong technical writing skills or not strong personal skills. But they completed doggone 76 credits of undergrad, right? So why are they not smart? And I think some of that has to do with expectation, for sure. That maybe the expectations are skewed a little bit. You expect college over here to be like college over there, or my college to be like your college. Those kind of things. And those experiences are very different. And I think it goes a long way to highlight that we still, as a culture, don't really understand what learning is all about, and that it is so dependent on what you experience, what you knew coming in, what the cultural intelligence of your niche is. And we expect that we're going to be able to, in that industrial model, produce 8 ounces of ground meat, and it's going to be the same everywhere. They got 8, so it's all the same. Well, so I want to kind of point out some things that I think are really, they're meaningful to me, and hopefully they'll be meaningful to you. I mean, Ken Robinson described it as the tyranny of common sense. I mean, school is what school was. Right? It's always been this way. So it must be right, but we seldom go back and ask ourselves how we got here. So I think one of our big responsibilities, and the fact that we're here, echoes that to me, that we need to always look at the system that we're using and see if it really is effective, and constantly ask that question, and if not, we work to change it. So right now, in all classes, let's face it, are a game, right? We try to actually figure out what it takes to win from the moment we walk in, right? The way we prepare, interact, attend, study, and even talk with the teachers, built on assumptions that we make about the winning condition of the course. I mean, these are the characteristics of the hidden game, and they often distract from the learning opportunities. Savvy teachers know this about the game, and they often create activities, assessments, grading structures that try to slam the game in the favor of learning. But all students look at the class with a natural question. What do I need to do to get the grade that I want? Instead of what is worth knowing, what is worth thinking or feeling or even doing. It's the only system in the world that I know of that keeps students guessing. Really, that delivers a quiz to force a student to study or memorize. I mean, it's coercion for the sake of compliance. And we call it responsibility training. We do more of it at the middle school and high school level than other levels. And when a student does poorly, we punish them, often with no hope of redemption. We gradually chip away at their success with B's, C's, and D's until it's mathematically impossible for them to be successful. Right? Some students truly believe that the odds are stacked against them and that they'll never be successful. And we do this to teach them responsibility. We do this and we accidentally, or maybe in some cases, intentionally teach them that they're not good enough. And it's the stupidest game that I can think of, and they hate to play it. So it's no wonder that students are dropping out in droves. I mean, 1 in 10 nationally, 1 in 4 in many urban areas, or higher in some areas. San Antonio is really suffering right now. Schools used to open more doors than they do now. And it used to be a tool for the life and career that you wanted. For many students, schools lack meaning and relevance and have become a means to an end. Schools tell you this is what you need, and this is the only way to get it. But it's a lie, and we both know it. So I offer this, and it's kind of a piece that I've come to, and it's a mantra that belongs on a t-shirt or on some binder letters over your bathroom mirror, that's fine. But perhaps the role of teachers is to loosen the restrictions on how our students learn and provide the context to what they learn. I mean, we're preparing them for a future that is really not ours, it's theirs. And we may not even be around to see it. That whole context idea, that we provide the context. I mean, we're keenly aware that our students and the students for whom we guide the process, they don't need us to learn. Right? They just need us to get credit. And they can go in many directions to learn what they want to know. But they need us to kind of frame that, to put it in a box. So students are really individuals in every sense of the word. And I think this kind of worth pointing out, we've talked about this a bunch, and you know this, but I think it's good as just a frame for where we're going. Our students are individuals, right? We need to think of them as such. They're masters of informal learning. They do it all the time. They can learn anything they want, anytime they want. As I mentioned, they just need us to get credit. They're consumers of knowledge. They're constantly determining whether this is knowledge I want or knowledge I don't need. What's the context by which I need this knowledge? Is it so I can satisfy the requirements of an adult, so they'll credential me to do the thing that I want to do, which is to get out of here and have the summer off and go to a college? Or is it they're constantly looking at those things? That tests, quizzes, and papers have lost their relevance as primary tools of assessment. So write that down, because that will be on the final for this session. So I thought about this earlier. What would be the response of a group of educators and academics if at the end of the semester you were asked to take a content knowledge test, a pedagogy test, right? A school or institution fair use rights and responsibilities test. I think that there would be an open revolt. I mean, we're talking the pitchfork and torch variety, right? With the storm the castle. It would not go over well because we recognize that those tools are flawed, that they're inaccurate, that in some cases they're insulting. If we use this knowledge every day, why does it matter if we got C on question 28? And I bet you it would change things dramatically if all of our school boards, if all of our district and state level administrators were required to take tests all the time. They would figure out pretty quickly these things. While they have been effective at seeing some things in large perspective, don't do a very good job of helping individual students be successful. So just a couple of thoughts there. Just to touch on these real quick, we live in a world where formal and informal learning happens all over the place. That didn't used to be the case. If we go back 150 years, knowledge wasn't printed on subway donors, right? Text only existed in a handful of places. It wasn't on everything else. I mean, our literacies have expanded to every printable or displayable service. How many of you use weather apps on your phone? Time to time? Travel apps, food apps? Do you tap that knowledge from time to time? Social networking? You escaped it somehow? They'll come for you. They will. We know. We gather information in a lot of rich places, and we can bring that information to bear wherever we want, and that would be informal learning. A student who say uses a weather app because they ride their bike to school, or a weather website, they check in, the night just to make sure that they're going to have all the clothes that they need. Develops a working knowledge of weather patterns. They recognize that, say here in Boise, the wind most of the time during the summer blows from the southeast in the morning and from the northwest in the evening.
Yeah, but they recognize it because they read the direction of the wind on the device, but they didn't know where the south or north in the valley because it didn't learn in the field what's going on with the clock in the sun and for where scarcity fire was.
So they learn the necessary information, right? But you're making my point beautifully. They can gather this information wherever they want, but the meaning of that information, the wisdom rather than the knowledge, right? The knowledge can be developed and built anywhere. It's that wisdom that the teachers, educators are uniquely qualified to help provide, and to ask the necessary questions. So, have you ever wondered why that is? Create an experience by which a student can use knowledge that they have to create new understanding, to gain wisdom, if you will. So, by accepting that formal and informal learning exist, and that they are the masters of separating between the two, that most of their knowledge construction comes in an informal setting, which is one of the things that leads to some terrible misunderstandings, which we see pop up on the news from time to time. That there's such a need. So when we go back to that kind of original, that mantra that printed on the mug, and I'll send it to you, which is the loosen the restrictions on how and provide the context to what. That we may see a direction by which we can start to apply all of this understanding that we see. That's a good question. I'll come back to that. So we'll jump through these a little bit quicker. I'm of the opinion that failure is a big problem. Not too much of it, but honestly too little of it. We stigmatize mistakes and often give no hope. I have a son who's pretty darn smart. Spent 2 weeks in the hospital. And despite a 504, despite accommodations made, a number of his teachers, 2 specifically, would not let him redo those activities or assignments. He was hospitalized. No fault of his own. An 18-year-old kid is not going to be in the hospital. And the teacher said, well, there's just no way to go back to it. So ultimately it became punishment. We see those punishments pretty often. And we say, well, okay, the student's failing. But that's not the failure I'm talking about. The failure I'm talking about is the failure where you can make a mistake and then redress that mistake to create meaningful knowledge. Right? I missed 8 questions on that quiz. Now what am I going to do with that information? Whew, thank goodness it was 30 and I still got a low E out of it. Thank goodness. Right? And whatever it was. I missed a bunch, but I didn't fail. Oh, thank goodness. Rather than, why isn't that knowledge there? Or maybe it is there. Maybe the test or the tool was either poorly written or not appropriate for what it was. We need to, I think, start to look at those. What do we do? What do we do with these mistakes? Video games, which kind of become this wonderful resource by which we can look at how informal learning is happening and how they motivate users to do it. Did anybody in here ever play the old text adventures? Like Zork, some of those? Yeah. You know what I'm talking about. I give those to my college students sometimes just as a, play this for a little bit. Tell me what you think. They're like, I don't know what to do. Basically, you open the mailbox, go north, go south, unsure, that kind of stuff. And once they kind of learn the rules of this and bump up against walls and get a few of you can't go that direction. Or that'd be a bad idea, you'd fall off the cliff. Those kind of prompts. And they actually make mistakes. Then they learn the construct of the game and they kind of move in that direction. That's a great example of kind of game mechanics used as scaffolding in a learning environment. Even though, if you've ever played a text adventure, there's no graphics. There's nothing pretty. It's all up here. It's just words. And they're incredibly exciting and motivating. At least they were in 1988 when I didn't have a girlfriend. But the idea is solid that with the right construct, failure becomes something really powerful, something that we use in a learning context. I mean, Pac-Man, Tetris, pole vaulters and high jumpers. All of those activities end in failure, right? You either get gobbled up, you run out of time, you block stacked at the top and it's over, or gravity wins. All of them end in failure, but they're incredibly exciting. We're pushed to get to the next level. I want to clear 12 feet this time. I want to get to line 150. I've only been to line 123. Can I go a little bit further? The failure actually becomes instructive. And so I think that we tend to stigmatize failure. In short, our students are just fabulous super learners, right? We talk about the things that our future teachers need to know, because I work in teacher education largely. But we need to respect them as incredible learners. Their schema may not be the same as ours, but that doesn't mean that they're not just as smart. So those are some things that I think are valuable. And as the very fact that you're here today, you understand that there are tools that they use that are incredibly powerful. There's a school district in Nevada, I was talking to somebody, who recently made the decision to stop banning cell phones and mobile devices when a levy was put down where they were going to buy technology. And a very savvy teacher said, if we allow our students to bring in their tools, we'll have twice as much as we were going to order. Everybody, that's interesting. We should do that. And they did. And they've had tremendous success. So, a couple of ideas. And these are often the source of quite a bit of pushback. But suggestions would be to ditch homework. Now that doesn't mean that we shouldn't continue to encourage students to interact with our subject matter outside of our classroom experience. But what if it meant that we didn't regulate it? We didn't say that, I'm going to assume I know what your evening life is like, right? You've got 8 hours. As soon as you're done with school, really nothing much to maybe you have to go the dishes away and sit there. But really, it's all about homework time. And you're the same. Everybody's the same after school, right? And that's often what, especially young teachers, think life will be like for their students. And that the way to really push them is not to ask them questions, not to find out what they know, but to assign them more work. Because that's what rigor really is. To drop due dates. Because often, just a couple of thoughts relative to this. That due dates are quite a farce. All right, so I'm going to assign all of you something, and it's due next Tuesday. And it's going to take about 2 hours. When are you going to start it?
What time on Tuesday? Yeah, so we say 2 hours before.
2 hours before. You ask a group of high school students, middle school students, college students, they'll almost all give you the same answer. It's usually the night before, the day before. You get a smattering of folks, well, I'm nervous about it, so I may start it tomorrow, or, We find that the arbitrary bounds that we place around assignments don't actually help. They actually hinder. The further we get away from something, as evidenced by every time my wife sends me to the store, right? I look her right in the eye. Okay, those 5 things. All right, I got my keys. I'm going. Right? I get there. I get 3, or I screw one of the 5 up, and we have another salted versus unsalted butter fight. And I hope you never. I didn't know there was a difference. Evidently, there is. So. But we find that by setting these dates, we often say, well, you don't really have to start working on it further. And that's the way it's perceived. So due dates become problematic. I also propose that we give students choice in what they do. Indulge me one more time here. I'm going to give you 2 choices. Your choices are you can swim 100 meters in the pool, right? 4 laps to 25 to 50. Or jump off a 10-meter diving platform. That's the really, really high Olympic one where they can do like 4 flips. Which would you choose? We got both. What would you choose? You jump how come?
It's the sun.
Okay. What would you choose?
I would choose
Swimming? Fine.
because it's a long way to drop.
But this is stuff that's fun, he says, right? Okay. What did you choose? Swimming? How come? Okay. This is your height. Okay. Guess what it falls? Okay. All right. Well, you're safe. What would you choose? Swimming? Okay.
You got both, I can pick either.
Yeah, that's right. It's covered. Okay. So you got to answer either. Why? Well, we've heard it's fun. Okay. You die? You gonna die or you gonna jump? I'll jump. Oh, okay. You gonna die?
Like, dive like this or jump like that?
Your choice.
I'll teach you.
No, no.
20 feet.
30 feet?
All the way across?
No, how deep?
Yeah, 20 feet.
The
Usually the diving wells on those big diving boards are 20
7 meters. Yeah.
Is the pool 20 feet deep all the way across, or is it a lot?
That's a good question.
Because I would not set out across the pool, but stop.
It's not. That's a really good point. Okay, we're gonna come back to that thought.
So what am I doing?
Yeah, what you
I'm jumping.
Why?
Because I'm not a great swimmer.
Because you're not a great swimmer.
Good job. Swimming.
Swimming? How come?
I don't want to try to jump.
Okay. What's interesting here about the answers is we get a snapper, we get some jumpers, we get some swimmers, you know, we get a diver, you know, once he's tested it out, right?
Don't break my neck.
Not again. Okay. Choice is a really interesting thing because whether you realize it or not, you expose your personal schema, background, and experience that makes something either palatable or in some cases possible. Now, you really dug your heels in and said, I'm not doing either of those. If I change that and say, well, okay, well, here in our Aquatics 101 class, we need to make an assessment early on about simple water acclimation skills. Can you get in? Can you change direction? Can you find the wall? And so these were the two activities by which we're going to assess that. And they're very different, but they both do the same thing. They allow us to assess what we want to assess. But in giving you the choice, we created a motivation for you. And if that was, I'm going to start swimming because I want to get sucked into the jump. Or I want to jump because I feel a lot quicker. Whatever that motivation is, it's yours completely. Now, regardless of how many pre-tests I give you, and how many, 100 question bubble sheets, I try to figure you out and profile you and call you a non-swimmer, scaredy cat, however label you. I can't do as good a job at determining what you're ready for than you can. But by giving you choice, we create an opportunity where you can bring that personal schema and background to bear in a meaningful way. So you and I might say, okay, well then, here's what we need. Are you comfortable here in the 8 foot, just jumping off the side, turning around, coming back? Right? I've got my life preserver right here, ready to fish it out if it doesn't go wrong. And we've created an alternate assessment based on something that we've mutually agreed upon. The curriculum, the needs of the curriculum are met, the needs of the student are met, and a relationship is building between teacher and student where if it's not right, let's make it right for you. Rather than saying, sorry, it's going to be an F. I'm going to punish you because you were not prepared to make the decisions that I had assumed you'd be ready for. So we start to talk about giving students choice, and it opens up this, philosophically, it's some fabulous idea. Where in the world does that go in the grade book? How do I grade that, right? And one of the other pieces is let them play. So it's a long, wandering route, unfortunately, to the point where we are now. Let's see if this is actually.
What does class look like in quest-based learning? It looks like a game. In a typical class, everyone does the same thing. There's no way for me to pursue my interests, choose activities to support the way I learn best, or customize the experience. But in a game, there are lots of choices. I can choose from many different activities that all lead to the same winning condition. In quest-based learning, it's the same. Class becomes a game where I can work towards winning and getting an A in class too. And I can do it my way. Let me show you. Quests are individual lessons that add up to a class, but in a quest-based class there are many more activities to choose from. In my quest-based biology class, I can choose activities that interest me right now. I can choose by category, experience points, keywords and tags, user ratings, and even how long it took other students. I can find out more about a quest before choosing it, including what other students have said about it. This can help me choose activities that work best with the way I learn. The quest itself can include all the video, text, and media I need to learn. Quests can be solo, cooperative, or even competitive with other players. Quests can be 100% web-based or give directions for something to do in the classroom. It's great. When I finish it, I turn it in right there. I can give notes to my teacher about the activity, upload a file, or link to a website that has my finished work. It's so much fun. Then I get to add my feedback. How long did it take me? What do I rate this activity? What comments do I have for other students who might want to complete it? I get to actually influence what happens in my education. Because it's like a game, I earn experience points for completed quests rather than letter grades. If my activity is not right, my teacher sends it back with changes so I can learn from my mistakes instead of getting penalized with a C. I can keep doing activities and leveling up until I get the grade that I want and win the class. It's amazing. Like a game, I can also earn awards, badges, and achievements for doing stuff in the game. I can get rewards for doing all sorts of things like finishing 5 quests in 5 days, great grammar or spelling, finishing groups of quests, just about anything you can imagine. Instead of a gradebook, I can see progress bars showing how far I have to go to the next level and the end of class. Unlike a gradebook class, I always have the opportunity to learn from my mistakes and move forward at my pace. Because I'm choosing my path, I can finish the quest as fast or as slow as I need to go to get it right. I never feel behind and always know where I need to go. Sweet, I leveled up! Now I have tons of new quests available. This type of learning suits me better than a traditional graded class because I have a say in how I learn and get to make choices. I can always see where I stand and what I have to do to get to the next level, literally. This is what learning looks like in the future, and I love it. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to get back to the game. I mean, biology.
So, in essence, that's a good question. We'll come back to that. There's a lot of, we'll come back to this, but we will get to it. So let's just talk about just the kind of the nature of the tool. First of all, it's built on the web. For those of you who understand, its backend is built PHP MySQL, running LAMP. Front end is Java, JavaScript, and jQuery. Built Ruby on Rails with a few different gems kind of built in. We designed it. We had someone local build it. This is actually the second version. The alpha version was a wonderful proof of concept. It didn't have a lot of the tools that we wanted to. But as you look at it here, you see a lot of video game-based elements. I think one of the most important things is we kind of capitalize on some of the thinking of people like Jane McGonigal, Tom Chatfield, if you're familiar with Fun Inc., wonderful book. One of the things he really talks about, really igniting people's interest is this idea of progress bars. Where do I stand, and am I really in control of that? Right? Once you realize that you are in control of your progress, and that progress is visible to you, it's a very motivating thing. We've seen that through a year and a half now of research specific to learner interactions. Yes, sir?
Does it go to state whether the college accepts the progress bar as a official grade?
Yes. Because it translates to a final grade. It represents progress along the path, and it will it can be used to give the traditional letter grade. The approval process is a very interesting one because it does not allow, we made this decision very deliberately, as my colleague Lisa Dolly and I had long discussions about should we allow teachers to give students partial credit on completed activities. And felt philosophically that was kind of against what we believe, that the discussion between teacher and student should continue until the knowledge or the progress is sufficient for us to be willing to check off that standard, that activity. That we would use that failure as a learning opportunity without penalty. And I'll show you the kind of results of that. So a teacher can either approve or return it. They can attach a reward to it. For example, Kim turns something in and the writing is so creative. And I can tell there's so much more effort beyond the rubric. Oh, good, I'm running out of time. Obviously, the idea of preset rewards in the form of badges, achievements, and actual rewards. I give Kim a wonderful Creative Writer Award, which is a 15 experience point bump on a 35-point assignment. Nice little bonus for putting in work. I can acknowledge, fantastic effort without punishing those who don't have her schema, who don't have her skill set, or don't yet have her interests, because there's no expectation that everyone's going to be like you. Reward or badges and achievements can be preset so that a blogger badge equals these 5 quests or 5 of these 10 quests. That we can use badging to separate or identify unique or special skill sets created within an environment where, again, the goal is not to produce the same person at the end of that class, but to produce a unique person with more knowledge, even quantifiably more knowledge, in a specific subject area. That my interests within biology may be slanted toward what I want to do, or the things that I like, or the things that I've done. And that we can still meet the standards, and in the case that we're talking about now, Common Core standards, we can still meet those standards, but you get out of what you want. We have any World of Warcraft players? Okay, it's a safe space, don't worry. So, can you describe real quick the...
Yeah, that's you.
It's been about 3 years since I've played, but yeah.
Well, that's you've developed, you've got knowledge in a schema that is, thanks very much.
These are pretty bad in everybody talks.
I played it before they went online. Just a game that
What's interesting about those games is, do they allow personalization?
Oh, yeah. Yes.
How so?
Well, you can create your own character. You can see what you look like. There's a lot of personal choices.
Is that important, though, really, what you look like?
Best advice I ever got from a student, don't tell them you're a girl online. So, yeah, it is important for certain environments, obviously. But I think the choice, yeah, is definitely important because then you feel automatically a part of that world, let's say.
Right.
And the other thing that is compelling is the skill set or group that you would like to start out belonging to. Doesn't mean you can't change, but it's still personalized. So when you start and it's not working, you can always go back.
So as you're completing quests and activities, your character changes.
Yes.
You gain more skills and abilities. Do you have any choice over those skills and abilities?
Yeah, this has been up here, but yeah, you just pick what you want to, I guess, hold up. If you want to do better archer.
So you slant the development in favor of the direction that you want to go.
Yes.
One of the big pieces of these types of MMOs, these huge universes for gaming, is they're built so much on the individual experience of the player that they are motivated to the point of absolute addiction for many, many folks. Now, while I'm not promoting developing a learning environment where 35-year-old men live with their mother in the basement, I'm not saying that that's the approach, but we should be very interested in what are the conditions by which this becomes so addictive. Because if we could make learning addictive in the same way, I think that society would be much happier about that.
Are you logging the online times on your users? On the
Yes.
platform? So do you actually have some which show up for 5 minutes, play around, then disappear, and go play soccer? Or do they even have guys who do like a whole weekend, 24 hours, completely?
The answer is yes. We see all manner of unique patterns in individual performances. We see exactly what we would expect. That's the wonderful thing about data, is that often it doesn't surprise us. Wow, that's completely what we never would have predicted that. We often see in the data, oh, yeah, that makes sense. What we often see as far as student interactions is steady during a period of time, absent during a period of time. Really heavy activity during a certain period of time, absent. I think of my lawn or my yard work the same way as student interaction, right? There are often other things that are much more important maybe than this class going on in my life. Maybe it's work, maybe it's travel, maybe it's family illness. But I get really motivated at times to knock out things that need to get done. And students do the same thing. They find these interesting and often disparate windows of time within their life to work on things. And when they're motivated, they do wonderful, tremendous work. We just don't regulate that anymore. Okay, so let me kind of get to the meat here, because I want to make sure that we talk about this. Student progress is tracked. I guess it's not very visible here. Maybe I'll try to zoom in on it. I think I can. Just stand here. Because we decided that the tool should give them the kind of progress that we would want to see, and the teacher should have access to this kind of progress. And I'll point at some of these. These are actually progress bars related to categories within a class. This is actually a student's player scorecard, and this shows the progress across the standards in that class, including how many experience points she's earned in each of these different areas. The idea here is that a teacher can identify where they're strong and where they're not, since a teacher can approve all work submitted by a student, or continue working with them until those are met. The teacher should have a high degree of comfort that these standards are actually being met. We can also see what they've worked on, the types of activities that they've selected that haven't started yet, and those things that they started and then decided they didn't actually want to do and drop. Of course, I just created a course just to show one possible way of laying out a choice-based curriculum. A student enters the class and they have 7 different activities. The lines represent pathways of prerequisites, that before these 2 things can be completed, this stands in its way as an activity. Or to think about it more from a game perspective, if I'm interested in this, then the system actually gives me 2 other things that are also interesting once I've completed that. More pathways of interesting choices open up to me. As I rank up, ranks within the class, I'll show you in just a second, more things are available to me. As I become stronger, if I gain more knowledge, I work with things, different activities, new activities become available to me. So it's not just a massive pool of 78 activities, which is currently what the curriculum is built at now. 78 activities. Keep in mind that in the old version of the course, the face-to-face, module-based course, there were 20 activities, all built into the grade book to be accomplished over 16 weeks, everything from syllabus checkoff, quiz to the final portfolio being submitted. They were all regimented. They were all delivered a very specific amount of time. And this is certainly a novel approach. Yes?
So, for the program, you team up with people you never met in
Yes.
and you have this quest to find a golden shiny sword in the dark forest. How do you do that team-based quest on your system?
Excellent question. So one of the benefits of a quest-based approach is that we can always add curriculum that students are engaged in. Remember the conversation we had just a little bit ago about diving versus swimming? We created new curriculum because there was a need for it. And it was co-created by us coming up with, we actually could have gone a different direction. We could have said, you're probably jump or swim if I really asked you to. But if I said, well, okay, this is what we need to accomplish, can you think of a better way to do that? Well, yeah, I'm going to go down the water slide. That looks like way more fun. I like water slides. Okay. That would work too, wouldn't it? Then we can kind of have that discussion about that. So there are those who like to play alone. There are those who like to play or work in a social setting. One of the things that we set up in the curriculum here are very specific team or collaborative projects. There are those that can be collaborative or not. Coming soon in the system is the ability to challenge or invite a friend to complete an activity with you, thus giving you each a little bit more experience points for completing, maybe 10 points. So I select an activity and I'm like, I want to do this one because it's cool, but I don't know if I'm ready. So I can, through the system, invite you to join me or challenge you to it to see who can get done first.
Are you basically that kind of online thing completing the classroom, or this is just something
So
talk about
the results I'm going to show you here in just a second are from a face-to-face classroom. It is being used online. I did mention rankings. These are actually the rankings from a class that we just completed. You'll notice that the commander, the chief, the lieutenant, all those lieutenant, your officer, and ensign actually represent the letter grades. So the grade that you want is always within reach. So if you want to get that A, and you can build yourself to commander rank, that's always within your ability. Keep in mind that all of the classes that I design are philosophically designed to make all students successful. I don't take any solace in a bell curve. I don't take any enjoyment in having a course so rigorous that students can't be successful. I mean, don't get me wrong. This is university, and there are plenty of students who come down with the dorm flu. We don't see them after week 3. Something goes haywire in their life. I have plenty of students, come to me in week 10 in tears because life has taken over. They can't be the student that they want to be. They've got to pull out, they had family tragedy, or I'm starting to think, I've got a chair in my office, and I'm starting to think that there's a correlation because I've had more students come to me today. So I'm like, I encourage people not to sit in that chair. We don't know its cause or effect. All right, so let me tell you about the research. So we built this system with the idea we wanted to be able to deliver a class in a new and novel way. Right? We wanted to be able to do all the things that we just talked about. No tests or quizzes, no duplicates, student choice. Right? They would get to play their way. That the system, rather than giving them kind of old paradigm approaches, would actually give them game-based feedback in the form of experience points, badges, achievements, awards. The demo for the classes looked like this. I tried to stylize it like David's artwork here, and it didn't come out really well. This is a traditional Boise State University cognitive slanted class where you've got a lot of traditional students, that 19 to 22-year-old demographic. These are all in this test group are pre-service teachers. They're going to teach anything from the elementary classroom to special ed, to phys ed, to football coaching. I mean history, because most of them will explain that way. So what are you going to teach? Football, history. And then you see a smattering, 1, 2, 3 students in other age groups. So we did have a pretty representative group, but it wasn't an equal distribution. These were the final grades, and I'll actually give this to you in a better view here in just a second. In this test group, 91 got A's or A pluses. These numbers have actually changed, and I'll explain that in a second. 1 failed the course, 1 moved through, and there were 5 incompletes. Those were students who were along the path, but were not at a grade that they were happy with yet at the end of the semester. All but 2 of these students also had major life-changing kind of things happen. Honestly, the things that we expect every semester. We expect there to be drama because that happens in the lives of young people and in the lives of all people. Most of those incompletes have now moved into the A column. And I'll kind of explain those a little bit. Of those in the A column, 41 received A's. 50 received A pluses. This was really strange because it was one of those surprises we did not anticipate. And I've got a graphic that shows this in a little bit, which was that even after students reached the winning condition of the course, they didn't stop playing. They could have walked away, yet they didn't. So, here we go. So I created this infographic. I just noticed recently there is a spelling mistake on it. So you don't get extra credit if you find it. I will republish it at some point. But this talks about the system and how it's working currently today. We have, that number is actually closer to 3,000 right now because teachers recently renewed their folks in. We have 200 beta testing teachers worldwide. All across the United States and now in 11 foreign countries. We're much closer now to 30,000. We're much closer to 150 billion experience points earned. And the questing hours is rounding closer to 30,000 right now. Those questing hours are recorded by minutes. As you complete something, and you saw the young man describing his biology class, it took him 10 minutes to complete this. Incredibly powerful information for a learner who has 25 minutes before they go to soccer practice or would like to do something with the class. I'm going to choose this. It's only 15 minutes. It's only averaging 15 minutes. So we use that to kind of create the... There's a lot of activity in the system right now with our beta teachers. Yeah? Sorry, say that again? Okay, so yeah, not evidence on this infographic. So our beta testing teachers are the youngest one is usually in 2nd grade. And I suppose the thing that you run into is that so much of it is created languages. It takes the students a little while to learn that language. All the way through high school, college, and into masters, and actually professional programs. We have four people using it to deliver professional corporate education, including 2 instructional designers at GE, which is pretty cool stuff. So, in just my class, 97 students rated over 2,000 quests. Their average rating out of 5 stars, which is really an interesting discussion to have. What would the student ratings be on material maybe that you interact or you created? And as teachers, are we willing to find out? Are we willing to ask that question in a format that doesn't pressure them into giving us these comments and ratings that they're giving are given back to their peer group, not to the teacher. I'll kind of show you how that works a little bit. And a ton of comments. This was in 1 semester with 97 students. The rewards and achievements given out, try to come up with some kind of visual depiction of this. I think this is interesting. Do you remember how many activities I said were in the original gradebook version of the course? It's 20, right? So the average number of activities completed by students are 37. They're completing a lot more activities. We actually raised the expectation. They're averaging 34 minutes per activity, which I personally, as from an instructional design perspective, I really want to bring that down. There's my misspelled word. It's completed, not completed. And this is their badges, achievements, and awards. Badges explicitly tied to collections of specialty knowledge, not required for them to use in this class, and awards being things that I chose to give because their example or their artifact was further than maybe I had requested. They put more heart, maybe more creativity into it, and received a little bit of a bonus because I was pleasantly surprised. So, I like, Miss Pac-Man talks very nice, all that. But I find it really interesting which quests were dropped. Which means a student started an activity and then went, this doesn't excite me, this isn't interesting to me, or maybe I already know this. And then the student dropped it. Second chances was our way of describing, you turn in an activity, or a question to me, it's not quite up to the expectation, I send it back to you. You have the opportunity to fix it and send it back. So it didn't meet the expectation, which tells me two things. And the first thing it tells me, or helps inform me, is what do I need to do to this activity to prevent that from happening again? Where's the failure in my design? I think about that all the time. Maybe it's self-deprecating, or maybe I just worry too much. But I want to know if I'm seeing a lot of repeated mistakes by a lot of different students, then I have to assume that that's a mistake in my design. 210 quests left unfinished, and that was, at the time, 73 were available to the group. There were actually 6 others that were also available, but not available to every group, because we actually created, as you and I discussed, original curriculum for a handful of students that wanted to do something different. Okay. This, to me, I think is the most exciting part of what I have to show you. So, in one semester of a college course, we opened up this curriculum with slightly higher expectations. The experience point totals were a little higher maybe than they should have been, because it was a calculated guess, really, as to what it would take for students to move through enough of the curriculum. The red bars indicate the student's progress in experience points. In each of those bars, there are a handful here in this middle section that were removed because they're the exact same as another student. Each of those represents an individual student's progress in the course. The white line is the winning condition. When you reach that, you submit your final portfolio, which shows that you as a teacher can use technology effectively in the classroom. You turn that thing in and you're done. So why in the world do we have so many folks continuing to work within the curriculum in the class if they don't have to? I turn that question to you. Hypothesis. I think for many that may have been the case. Why else would students who didn't need to do more work continue working?
Well, it's raining outside, man, money that for more.
Right. Say that again. I missed part of that.
It was raining outside and they had no money left.
Oh yeah. They didn't play, but they didn't have any world program.
They keep playing to allow more people to reach that line. If they play as truly collaborative, they work together to get points.
That's a very good question, and I think if we went through the research here was purely quantitative. We have not analyzed qualitatively. We've done a little bit of text mining on their comments, but have not really looked at the qualitative experience in the same way.
You have this mystery about different themes and different tracks of learning and for them to level up. So did you actually follow a project? Who of those high scores actually follow which track.
Oh, yeah, so-
because they reach the 2,000 experience points, but they say, well, I'm 2/3 down that track, let's finish that track, so we actually have that book done, or
Right. The badge, right.
Get the badge done.
So we did do some decision tree analysis as part of the data mining process. We ran quite a few different data mining analysis techniques and tools, and what we found was there were no recognizable common pathways. In a gradebook class, it's easier to identify some of those things. It's easier to say, okay, well, all of the students who completed the first 4 activities on time also got, a grade of B or higher. It's easier to make those connections. But with 73, expanding possibilities and time averaged into that equation, it made it much higher. But here's what we did find. So the characteristics of attractive quests were kind of the focus of the research. These are more just kind of descriptive characteristics of the research. What we did find through decision tree analysis is that students were much more attracted to quests that were, I know you find this right, shorter in time, contained media but not too much media. Watching 7 to 10 minutes of video was powerful. Watching 2 back-to-back episodes of 60 minutes was not. So we also identified that quests that were higher in experience points and lower in time were more attractive, which makes complete sense. That's not a criticism. It's economy. I've got a little bit of time. Why don't I get as much as I can? We also found some other kind of interesting things. They don't like working in Word, PowerPoint, or Excel. Some, I take it back, some really enjoyed Excel. There was a small group. So to answer your question more specifically, there were groups that favored certain kinds of activities, and they tended to have a similar experience, although not the same.
But isn't that the criticism my one colleague here actually had earlier to say about school, that the industry complains about that students or students and college students will not be educated and prepared enough for the workforce in the real life. So if your students here are complaining about that they don't like Word, don't like Excel, I'm sorry, I'm not going to hire anyone who don't refuse to have a GA who can't deal with Excel.
Right.
If you're able to do the class on the Excel, Excel spreadsheet, I have issues with you. I really have issues about
You bet. Okay, so what we're talking about are I think 2 different things, and I think they're really important. So you hit on a point that we, the collective we, have to solve, which is we need students with specialized skill and ability. Yet what we're packaging for them often is not attractive enough. They don't either see the connection, they don't have the relationship, which I think especially in post-secondary, is a problem. They don't have a connection with someone to be a mentor and say, I totally get what you're interested in. But let me tell you, if you really want to do what we're doing, let's dive into this. All right? That they lack that mentorship. So the question that becomes, can educational systems that we develop be better at identifying what students know and creating for them pathways by which they can achieve that knowledge that we need them to have, or they recognize that they need to have for an occupation or activity that they want to do. Boy Scouts figured this out years ago, by the way, with the idea of merit badges. Girl Scouts as well. Specialized curriculum that denotes that you know how to do something. CPR, swimming, archery. Okay? Nuclear science, there's actually the number of badges is amazing. So we've recently won a digital media and learning grant, which is a Mozilla. Are you familiar with the Mozilla badges over here? So we're going to be building one of the first 45 groups to be building Mozilla ODI badges this coming fall, and with Noah. And so our system will allow us to do exactly what you're talking about, to create a quantifiable Excel badge right? Or maybe even phases, minor badges, major badges, multi-sheets, all the way to macros, whatever you want. And for you as a professor looking for the right GA, as a college looking for the right entry characteristics, to look specifically at digital badges to find out what students know and what they're able to do. So within the curriculum, say, let's go back to our biology example, we can identify certain pathways by which students can earn badges within the scope of the curriculum, meeting the standards of the school, but to signify what it is that you're interested in, what you do well. And here's the important part, because we're not relying fully on one school, one teacher, one already taxed, underfunded educational system to provide all that knowledge, we can be willing to accept that Salt Pine is going to help us achieve this badge. That whether you earned the badge from Lake Hazel Middle School, Mountain View High School, or the Khan Academy, or World of Warcraft, that these badges represent quantifiable learning. Yes?
I just had, please finish.
No. I'm just about to jump over to your questions.
So my question is, when you're looking at these results in terms of who finishes the quest, who becomes teacher, is there a difference in which quests people find attractive based on gender, ethnicity, socioeconomic class? I'm just thinking about a lot of people not able to develop memory, fast internet connections, and download and do that. Looking at statistics about younger women not gaining as frequently as men. I'm looking at the history of the industry having been to white male designers in the United States. So how do you make this attractive to all students, and are you seeing differences in those attractions?
So, as we started doing the development, we realized that we had made a small error in the data collection procedures. That was that there was one item, so that the system was capturing every click by every user, every page, how long was spent there, all these things. It was not collecting who the user was. We made that correction about halfway through. It didn't affect any of the results that I've explained today or given today, but we were missing the most critical piece, which was who. And it was an oversight by, they had not paid close enough attention to the design spec and made that same mistake. We are collecting that data now, and that's the next. How do, and data mining helps us do that. Rather than asking the question, do young women between the ages of 19 and 24 choose activities different than when men in 19 and 20? When we data mine, we dig those things out in ways that we don't expect. We find that there's something unique about 28 and 29-year-old women, and they do things like this. Or at least in this test group, they did things like this. So to answer your question, yes, we're moving in that direction. We don't yet have that data, and that hopefully that explains why.
Why be the announcement, because how do you get along with the ERB on that topic?
Oh, okay, so that's a great, IRB is a great question. Yeah, institutional review board, making sure that we're not, injecting, small children or whatever. We don't hurt anything. Because we built a system so it was both PAPA and FERPA compliant, so that students could interact in a social environment around school without identifying themselves, because they do so with a game exam. So they are anonymous players, and in the same way PAPA covers you if students are given randomized, not student numbers, but randomized identifiers. And I share with you my randomized identifier. I, as a student, have elected to give that away rather than a teacher putting you in a position where you compromise that. So because we did not connect, we looked at the volume of data. We didn't say that you did these things. We identified that people with these demographic characteristics responded this way. So we do have to be very careful if there are individuals that are identifiable by one of their characteristics. Okay, to answer your question. How can we use something like World of Warcraft to create course content? Ooh, love that question. So I have two students come to me, and I want to make sure we don't run out of time, but we're getting close. And I hope, again, hopefully this makes sense as the beginning of this conversation. I hope that we get to talk more. And if you're interested, I'm available to chat more after today. But two students came to me, and I put an Xbox 360 and a Wii in my classroom and set up some quests because I discovered that there were a couple of, you remember that that demographic age group, there were a couple of students who were really uncomfortable with gaming consoles. They lacked the schema that, say, the 21-year-old did. So I was like, okay, well, first of all, every teacher should know that you can use these types of tools in your classroom, just like you can a smartboard, just like you can an iPad. So I brought in these things, and I built 3 quests. One was just play. Just play both of these consoles for at least 20 minutes. Just come and play. Bowl or dance or do whatever you want. Second quest was, here are a couple of lessons, game-based lessons that use the games that we have. Play through one of those lessons. Just do one of the lessons. And of course, most of the 19, 20-year-olds are like, what? We get to do this as class? They think they're getting away with something. The third in that series of prerequisite quests was create your own game lesson. Well, 2 boys came to me and said, we really want to do something on Call of Duty. I was like, okay, let's do that. And so they brought in Call of Duty, and I said, here's what I'd like you to do. Just sit down and play the campaign mode for 20, 30 minutes. And they sat down and they played the class, of course, thinking they're getting away with something. They, afterwards, I said, okay, what did you notice? They talked a little bit about it. And one of the things that they really connected to was there was a real difference. They were playing Call of Duty World at War, which is a World War II based scenario. They were on the island of Peleliu. They were playing the roles of Private Lewis and Private James or something like that. And they were fighting their way to take over this village, and they said that they were really shocked at how different the tactics were between the American Army and the Japanese Army, what that was like. So I kept asking more questions about that. Well, what do you mean? And they explained it. After about 20 minutes of, I think, nice, crucial conversation, they were able to identify a number of really interesting cultural things about playing this level. And were able to, and I asked them questions that they had to search. Well, what was, was that actually a style? And they're gathering a lot of, I said, now, you take what you did and create a lesson for me that I can play through that and learn what you did. Prompts, questions, specific in-game activities. Instead of going straight this way, go through this hut, which has a lot of artifacts on it. Look at those. And they actually created these things. So I took their interest of a game, and by the way, they're still convinced they didn't do anything for like 2 days. In the end, I got what I think is a really intelligent evaluation of what's happening in something in their life. They created not only a lesson plan, but an assessment strategy to identify some prompts and questions, then to have the verbal discussion with students like the way I did. They created all of these really cool teachery objects in a class about how to create teachery things. Tricked them. And in the end, we actually have more curriculum that students created. So they created curriculum for my class. Once again, I don't have to do any real work. So I guess to answer your question, how do you use that? Well, you engage in the conversation. You ask them to bring their knowledge to something. And then you just ask interesting questions. Sometimes they'll go in interesting directions, like cultural differences and how American versus Japanese soldiers were trained, and what their philosophies were. What was the difference just culturally? And sometimes those kind of go in directions where there just isn't something. But I would argue that there's a lot that can happen, and none of this would have been possible if I had been glued to my smartboard and had been delivering didactic lessons every day. It was because the students had the freedom to do what they wanted within the frame of the classroom. And I had the opportunity to kind of direct a couple of students, get a plate spinning and then kind of come over here and then come back and, you know, and they were engaged to do what they wanted. So, I have one more question. Student resistance to quest-based learning. Believe it or not, we haven't had it. We've had about 325 students complete courses using a quest-based approach because the approach is based on choice, just like the conversation we had, coming back to it. But if this doesn't fit, then what does? Well, tell me what you're interested in, or what don't you like about this, or what else do you know? Oh, you're in soccer? Talk about that. We find a way to dovetail soccer into something. Well, if we created an activity that was more like this, would that be more interesting to you? And then you can ask students, well, how can we take what you like and connect it to the curriculum? And most of the time, they're more creative than we will ever be. It's just being willing to have those conversations and loosen the restrictions on how.
Chris, thanks. I'm going to cut it off here.
Yeah, we're at time.
I need them to, since I literally cut it off.